everybody. Today's topic is Jesus Christ and maybe some of the more untold parts of the story. And I thought this topic was appropriate because yesterday was Easter and today is Easter Monday in many parts of the world. So let's dive right in. This video is not intended to be religious necessarily. You can take it however you want it. It's more historical, just the accountings of a life of an enlightened man named Jesus, as far as I know. And just a little bit of background. I have been told in a healing session before that I walked with Jesus in a past life, and that would have been as one of his disciples. The name that came up at that time was Thomas. And so I've kind of resonated with this, although I have no direct memories. But either way, whether or not it's true, I do believe there's a lot of valuable information that I do believe as true, and so I will share that today. So let's start back more towards the beginning. Jesus was born as the son of a carpenter, and so by trade, was in a lower class system as a carpenter. Maybe making a good, humble living. But he was actually an Essenic Jew, so he was Jewish, and that was one of the more strict sects of Judaism, and where they refrained from a lot of things like eating meat, and they were a little bit more strict. So he grew up in a spiritual background. Now, you could call it religious even at that time. And so let's remember, and I'm not talking for or against any religion here. My personal belief is that all the religions teach the same thing. It's just a different prophet at a different time in a different country coming to earth with the message of love and with the experience of enlightenment and trying to share that with the rest of us humans. So for me, all religions support what I call spirituality, and it's all the same concepts of love and energy. So anyway, so Jesus was not Christian. So let's think about that for a moment. Buddha was not Buddhist. Jesus was not Christian. Abraham was not Jewish. The founders of religions often came into this knowledge first, and then the religion was created after that prophet, sometimes after they died. In Buddha's case, it was created when he was alive and was taught and spread. But let's always remember that if you ever see people arguing about religions and thinking that their religion is the only way, the only path, just remember that Jesus was not Christian. So how did he get there? So it's my belief that anybody can reach enlightenment, and there's a million paths up the mountain, and if you follow any one of them wholeheartedly, you will get there. And each human will enlighten. So that being said, and once again, this is not religious, it's not a religious video, let's go back to Jesus. I think he was pretty cool. What a great man, right? So he grew up learning everything he could about Essenic Judaism, being an Essenic Jew. And so at age 13, he actually learned all he could from his teachers and began to outsmart them. So he would ask questions that they couldn't answer. And so it was then that Jesus decided to search further. And so he left his homeland, which is an area that we now call Israel, and he traveled to India. While in India, he came under the guidance of some other practices and teachings, most likely Hinduism-based philosophies, which isn't necessarily a religion, more of like a way of life, sharings of truth, things like Vedanta. And it was there that Jesus became enlightened. So he either had an experience and or did the work in order to gain all the knowledge and experience he needed to understand the truth fully, to connect with God, or as in the Bible says, to reach the kingdom of heaven. And remember, Jesus always said, the key to heaven is within, or heaven lies within us. And what he was trying to teach us was that heaven is a state of mind. It's not necessarily a place we go. When you get that high up into enlightenment or nirvana or Vedanta, the ultimate knowledge, that close to God, you realize that there is no such thing as places or people. And you kind of transcend that experience of being a human altogether. Heaven is more like a vibration, a place where we can reach inside of us a state of consciousness. So he did reach that, and he was trying to share. But then imagine, this is more in the Dark Ages. Spiritually speaking, we have a Golden Age, Dark Age, Golden Age, repeat, and that goes on 24,000 year cycles. So back when Jesus was here, we were more towards the Dark Age, starting maybe to come out a little bit. We only recently came out of that about 400 years ago. So anyway, we have one enlightened man going around trying to teach what he knew to help others reach that same place themselves. And so basically we have an enlightened man trying to teach unenlightened man these high-level concepts. And who was writing it down? It was the disciples and followers. They were devoted, and they did believe in Jesus, and they followed him, and they did their best. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, they were not enlightened yet. So they're trying to interpret an enlightened man's words. So you can see how it's possible that some things got lost in translation. And also the Bible was written in Hebrew, and we usually read it in English, at least in my country, in my language. So there's also another chance for things to get lost in translation. Not saying the book is right or wrong. I think there's a lot of great concepts in that and every religious and spiritual book that we can take and apply to ourselves. So let's learn more about Jesus. So he came back, and at about age 33, he started his missionary work, traveling across the lands, healing people. He did something called laying of the hands back then. And we now have that same energy work, otherwise known as Reiki, the Japanese healing technique, or Qigong in China, Lomi Lomi in Hawaii. It's all the same thing. So many cultures have it. It's human on human healing. And we are just channeling that universal life force energy through us and into another for healing, because once again, everything is energy. Everything's made out of the same energy. It's just in different forms. So we all have the ability to connect to that energy, which everything, including ourselves, is made of, and channel it and use it to heal and help others. Jesus realized at this point in his life that part of the path, once reaching that state, was to help everyone else and bring his neighbors up to his level, love your neighbor. And so he taught many things, and he taught in parables, and sometimes was misunderstood. And that's okay, because we're able to gain still a lot of valuable things out of what he said. So at age 33, he started his rounds teaching. And it was at that time that there was certain groups of people, maybe churches or people in positions of power, that kind of wanted to suppress that information. Now, why would they want to do that, we might ask? And the most likely reason is that at the time they had control over the people, because the people depended on them for their religious knowledge, for their path to salvation. So if they're dependent on a certain organization, they're going to follow the rules, donate their money, and more or less be in service and gratitude and under the control of this group of people. So Jesus wanted to spread that knowledge to everybody, because he saw the truth that we are all one. And so by helping another, you're helping yourself. By harming another, you're harming yourself. Keep in mind, Jesus was not perfect, as we say perfect. He also had emotional things come up. During the path, and in the books of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all pretty much tell the same story from different points of view. We can find these stories where, for example, one time Jesus was walking through the desert, I think with his disciples, and he was really hungry, and there was a fig tree coming up, And when they got to the fig tree, it had no fruits on it. And he was very hungry. And he cursed the fig tree and said it'll never again bear fruit. Needless to say, that tree had died. And there was another time when Jesus got angry. He was coming back to, I'm trying to remember exactly correctly. He was coming back to a temple or a place of worship. Um, it could have even been in Jerusalem. I'm not quite clear on those details. But he was going there, and it was supposed to be a holy place, a place of worship. And he saw sales tables set up there, and people trying to exploit and gain monies from people, and more or less take advantage of the energies of that location and turn it into merchants and monetize this place. And at that point, Jesus got very upset, and he actually went into the tabernacle, flipped all the tables over, and then started hitting people with like branches from the trees in punishment. And we could say maybe he overreacted, but he was very passionate about what he was doing. Okay, so overall, he was trying to do good, but keep in mind he's in a human body and he's still human, and so he also had human things come up. So as he was teaching, he wasn't preaching for very long before he started to gain the attention of the entities that were in control, and they wanted to put a stop to this. A lot of people say it was the Jewish people that killed Jesus. That may or may not be correct. Perhaps it was a Jewish person that executed the order, but it's most likely that the order came from the church in Rome, which would be the Roman Catholics. And once again, this video is not talking good or bad about any religion or any groups of people. Everything for a reason, and everything was supposed to happen the way it did. And so this is just the way it happened. And so Jesus was going around, and he was healing people. And people were starting to flock to him because he would lay his hands on the sick people and they would heal, or they would just merely touch his robe and heal from diseases and illness and be cured. And it was at one point Jesus had a bunch of people gathered in this house, and his family had discredited him. They disowned him by this time. They said, who is that? He has nothing to do with us, because he was kind of making some waves. But I remember Jesus said to pay your taxes to the Romans too. He did say, because somebody asked him about taxes, what should we do? We're being oppressed. He's like, pay the taxes. So he wasn't trying to be a troublemaker per se, but he was trying to teach truth, and it didn't quite line up with some of the oppressive tactics. So then there was this point where Jesus was in this house, and he was healing people. There were so many people gathered and listening to him talk and say different things. And then his mother and his brother came to the door. These are from stories in the Bible. And somebody came up to Jesus and said, Jesus, your mother and your brother are here. Should we let them in? And Jesus replied, what mother? What brother? He said, all the people here hearing the word of God are my mother, brothers, and sisters. And it wasn't like he was intentionally disowning his family, but he was making the point that people that understand, that are in the knowing and on the correct vibration and frequency, are who he cares about, and everybody. He's opening it up to everybody. And I don't think his family was allowed in because they might have been trying to get in for different reasons now at this point. Maybe their claim to fame, like, oh yeah, we know this guy now that he's famous. That's my son, that's my brother. Let us in. We're part of this. Now that he gained traction. But whereas before they kind of thought he was a little crazy and brushed him off. So it was more just the return of energy. All right, let's fast forward now. So now we have Jesus at the Last Supper, and we kind of know that story. Before we get there, Jesus used to constantly go up to the top of the mountains and leave his 12 disciples at the base of the mountain, and he would ascend the mountain, and where he would speak to God. according to the scriptures, and then he would come back down with messages. So, what was Jesus doing when he was up there? Well, I dare to say he was meditating. We also know that he practiced prayer a lot and talked about that. So, prayer is when we are speaking to God, creator, source, and meditation is when we are listening. Now, listening for the answers, of our prayers. So I think that's what Jesus was doing at the top of the hills and the top of the mountains in solitude. All right, so fast forward to the Last Supper, and this is where I was told that my past life I was there. The person had told me that you were there at the Last Supper, you were the disciple that warned Thomas that Jesus was going to betray. You were the person that warned Jesus that Thomas was going to betray him. And my reply to that was, Thomas, I thought it was Judas that betrayed Jesus. And the person was like, oh yeah, Judas, that's what I meant. And so this was at a Reiki share, so we had already moved on now, and then I was participating in some Reiki and healing somebody, and it kept running through my head, Thomas, why did she say Thomas? She said that I was Thomas, but she meant Judas. And I had thought Thomas might have been one of the disciples, but I wasn't too clear on all the details. So I went home and looked it up later on. What I discovered was that, in fact, Thomas was Jesus' closest disciple, and actually it was his cousin. And Thomas used to look like Jesus, and he would get called Jesus a lot and mistaken for Jesus. Many of you may have heard of him be called Doubtful Thomas. And I'll explain why he got that name too. Another fun fact is that Thomas wrote the Book of Thomas, which was removed from the Bible. Now, why would a book be removed from the Bible? Well, and to be honest, I still have yet to read this book, so I'm going to do that. But I do believe I wrote it. And so that's very interesting. And I do feel that, and I feel like maybe this life I'm here to once again write something similar. But anyway, so the Book of Thomas is allegedly all about how to become enlightened. It was Jesus teaching the people how to become the Christ, how to get the Christ consciousness, how to be in his position, how to draw in the kingdom of heaven, how to enlighten, spiritually complete. So this is what the Book of Thomas was. So you could see, by logic, if there was a group of people that was trying to control the people, then of course they would remove the book. That would undermine their control. That would give the people the power to actually complete these actions themselves. No longer do you have to depend on a church to get to salvation. Now you can do it with the steps that Jesus himself was teaching. So that has been said to be removed from the Bible. So now, Thomas was Jesus' closest disciple. At the Last Supper, he may have warned Jesus that Judas was going to betray him. By this time, Jesus already knew that he was going to be betrayed by one of his disciples. As a matter of fact, he said that at the Last Supper, because through meditation, when you get to enlightenment, your chakras start to open up. And as you go up in frequency from your heart, you have your throat, which is actually lower vibration than the heart, but then you have your third eye, that pineal gland, and the crown, and those two are able to connect you with the knowledge of spirit, of God. And with the third eye open, you can just know things. Intuition gets really on point. You're able to just know what's going on, and through meditations receive information. This happens to me a lot this life, and maybe a lot some of you as well. It's all about decalcifying that pineal gland, that part of our brain that really connects to spirit, to source, and opening up our chakras and creating a healthy temple, as I call it. The body is your temple, right? And that needs to be healthy in order to have all the energy flowing properly. So Jesus already knew all this, and he was still yet going into it because he knew his purpose. He knew what he was supposed to do this life. And on top of that, he was enlightened. So he also understood that essentially this is all fake. It's just a fabrication. It's just particles vibrating. It's just energy. It's kind of like a game. It's entertainment for God. It is transcendable. He had eliminated his suffering already. That would be another symptom of enlightenment. So he was already out of the suffering of the world, and he understood the full picture. He was at the top of the mountain, seeing everything in the horizon, understanding the full truth. And at that point of enlightenment, you can vibrate your particles outside of the human perception range. So you can, as you raise your frequency, you raise your vibration, you can actually leave your body at will. This has happened to me this life as well, out-of-body experiences. It wasn't on purpose, per se. I wasn't necessarily in control of it the first couple times it happened. But you can practice and you can learn to control it. And many yogis over history have done this. There's been stories in India and different places in the Himalayas and places like that where yogis, they know they're going to die, so they go into meditation and they even tell their disciples, and their followers that they have a couple weeks left or whatever, and on the day of their death, they go into meditation and they purposefully leave their body. Now, those bodies have remained sitting upright and not decaying for weeks or months after the yogis have done this. And I believe that's because they are still coming in and out of their bodies periodically. So the body is able to stay in a stasis. And then when they finally leave, you move on to the next realm, or what the Bible might call heaven, or whatever your beliefs are about the afterlife. So Jesus understood all this. So when he was on the cross being put to death, and remember, he did this willingly because he knew that through this act he could influence and help so many people. And proof in the pudding, we're talking about him today, about 2020 years after this event. So it definitely had a huge effect on Earth. And he was one of the most influential people that we still talk about today, when one of the best sold books in the world, right? The Bible, the Holy Bible. So it was effective, and he knew he had to do this, and he did. And so let's get to the end about why Thomas was called Doubtful Thomas and what happened to Jesus. So Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. Now, unpopular opinion, maybe. Reminder, this video is not religious in any way, not speaking for or against anything, just simply trying to be historical and in truth. I'm always trying to offer truth and education. Now, entertain this idea if you will, and if not, that's okay too. But Jesus was enlightened. He knew how to vibrate his particles and to a higher state and to leave his body. And so when he was dying on the cross, it was painful, I'm sure, and at some point he probably chose to leave his body because there was a lot of pain and the people are getting the point, and so it looks like he's dead. So then they put his body in the tomb, in that cave, put the big rock in front of it, and as the story goes, 3 days later, and also another fun fact, there was some women that helped out with this process and stayed with Jesus. And he still had a lot of followers, although some people did probably disown him at this point to save their own skin. But remember, Jesus was on the cross with a couple other sinners that are also getting crucified, and he was compassionate towards them and trying to help them towards salvation. Remember, when Jesus was alive, he didn't hang out with kings and government officials and rich people and priests and people of that caliber, not to say they're bad or good, but he hung out with the poor, with prostitutes, with thieves, with beggars, people on the streets, people in need of healing, blind people, sick people. That's who Jesus was around for a good part of, his ministry. All right, so Jesus is in the cave, his body is in the cave, in the tomb. And we all know the story. Here we are celebrating Easter. However many years later, what are we celebrating? The resurrection of Jesus Christ. Okay, so he came back into his body. He knew how to leave and come back in using the conscious awareness and using the body as a tool. So what he did was he came back into his body and then left. Because at this point he was like, I came back to my homeland, I did my piece, they killed me and stuff, so I'm going to go back to India now. And what he did was he went back to India, where he lived out the rest of his days in peace and probably helping so many more people and teaching. And, sharing that state of enlightenment with so many people. So now he's back in India, and Thomas knows. Thomas is Jesus' closest disciple. It's likely that Thomas was the next closest being of enlightenment besides Jesus. It's possible that Jesus was the only enlightened person on earth at this point in time. Who knows? Probably not, actually, because he got taught by people in India. And Buddha was there 500 years before him. So there's constantly humans that are reaching this state. Some of them become famous, some of them don't. And it doesn't really matter. Everybody's going to get there. So Jesus is in India again after his death, which is probably about 3 years after he started his ministry, not very long. He wasn't going around teaching for that long. And now Thomas is running around saying, you guys, Jesus isn't dead. Jesus isn't dead. He's okay. And people are like, dude, we saw him on the cross. There was like blood and everything, and they poked him with some spears. Like, nah, dude, he was dead. So they started calling him Doubtful Thomas because nobody believed Thomas. But remember, nobody believed Jesus at first either. So it's kind of, and no blame to anybody. It's a little bit unbelievable when people are going through symptoms of enlightenment, when they can walk on water. How would Jesus be able to walk on water? Once again, he can manipulate matter and energy. He can make his body so light because we're heavy. We're a dense heaviness that's a lower, slower vibration. The more something vibrates, the faster it gets, the lighter it gets. Just think of water changing from ice to water to gas, to water vapor, solid, liquid, gas. You see the particles of ice sink in our air, water, and then vapor rises. So you see it's the same element, it's just a different frequency, and that frequency change is heat. So I can get into some science about it, but let's go back to the spiritual side of the metaphysics. So now Thomas was going around telling everybody, and there was people like Mary Magdalene that saw that Jesus appeared to after his death, and there's also stories about that in the Bible, which that's taken as true, according to the people who believe the Bible and who wrote the Bible. So yeah, that happened too. At the point when you reach that state of conscious awareness or enlightenment where you can leave your body, you can also appear to people as vision, as your light body, or as your spirit. You can show up and speak with them. And there's also many accounts of that in history in India with different yogis and gurus doing that to their disciples and their students. While we're on disciples, the number 13 is very powerful. We had Jesus and his 12 disciples, Jesus making 13. Buddha also had 12 disciples. So there's 13 lunar cycles in a year, 13 full moons. 13 is a very strong number. Why do you think they made it Friday the 13th unlucky? To try to hide the true power of 13. So anyway, that's another video. So Jesus was alive. He called Thomas back to India too. Thomas resisted for a while, but eventually, nobody was believing him in Israel, and he went back to India and probably lived with Jesus for the rest of their days, of their natural life, sharing and spreading truth. So this is the story and history of Jesus. And see what you think. Just like any other teaching, take it in, do some research, and believe it or not, it's up to you. But I do feel feel this. I resonate with it. And I do believe that I was there in a past life. And so, here we are this life. So what are we going to do, It's 2021. And it's just after Easter. So we can resurrect at any time. We might feel dead inside. We all go through periods, ups and downs, emotions in life where we might even feel dead inside, or we notice ourselves falling into some bad habits. We can resurrect ourselves, we can revive, we can renew, we can have a rebirth at any time. Okay. Remember, everything is energy, and we are here to master energy. And once again, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Energy is matter in form. Energy in form is matter. When we get to that level of mastering energy, we can master matter too. This isn't done to become powerful. It's done to return to be at one with God, as they say, to be in the oneness, to get out of the separation. Because remember, suffering comes from separation from the whole, from the oneness, from that one eternal energy that we call God. And what is a body? A body is a form, and what are forms? Forms are boundaries. This is my hand, this is not my hand. There becomes a separation. So when we dissolve those boundaries, we just become that energy. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for staying with me. And I wish you all a great week, great Easter, whether or not you are religious. It doesn't matter. We're all spiritual beings experiencing a human existence. Peace, love, and happiness. Hello, everybody. Cut. Hello, everybody. Today's topic is Jesus Christ. And a little bit about the Untold story, maybe the parts that you haven't heard or the less popular depictions